This story takes place in Atlanta, GA. Crime in Atlanta, Georgia has been a significant problem since the mid-20th century. Is it a safe place to visit or even live? How can you protect yourself and your loved ones? A 911 call is always a good idea, even though no one made a call this time. At 2 a.m., above the hill, a neighbor has heard noises of gunshots, and the police arrive and see a car in a very suspected place. The police immediately take a look at the vehicle. Male, bald head, asleep at the wheel, explains the officer. Unfortunately, the male wasn't asleep. He had a gunshot wound to the right side of his stomach, to the back of his head as well. Go ahead and start fire and Grady out here, said the officer. The other officer said that the units were coming out. Without wasting time, Sergeant Jackson reports the death. Detective Andre Lowe was raised in this era. I've been to the church of this area, he says. So Detective Andre Lowe knows the people that live here and is familiar with this place. When he took the first close look at the victim, he immediately knew who that male was. Detective Andre Lowe worked with the victim before, when the victim worked as security. The victim was a 48-year-old white man called Mike. The victim was born and raised in Atlanta, and he was a well-known promoter in Atlanta's clubs. He leaves behind a wife and 5 children. As the police officers take a good look inside and outside the car, they notice 2 castings in the vehicle's backseat. Not only do they find castings, but there is also a lot of money there. The police officers take a lot of pictures to use for evidence. There were thousands of dollars. It kind of makes you wonder if this was a robbery or what, because that money was still in the vehicle, says Detective Andre Lowe. As mentioned before, a neighbor has heard the noises of the gunshots. Let's go and ask around the neighborhood, says the detective. Someone must know what happened. As they walked a block away, the detective and the police officers found 6 other castings. The police officers knocked on the neighbor's door and asked if they had heard anything. Then, the team found a witness around the shooting time but didn't call the police. The police officers decide to go and ask her some questions. This is Detective Andre Lowe. Can you tell me what happened tonight? He says. She says, I was talking to Mike, right there, in the corner of the street. I was trying to be one of the bottle service girls. Then, I saw these 2 guys. One went to the passenger side and put a gun to my side. The girl said they would kill her if she didn't leave. She says that Mike, the victim, said that he has no money. Then they started shooting. She said that she immediately ran. She was scared. Did you see how the other 2 guys looked? Says the detective. No. All I saw was that they were all in black. They had on hoodies, says the girl. Okay, says the detective. The police officers and the detective are happy that they found her. However, they got doubts too. Why didn't she call the police? Now or later, they still have some other good questions that she has to answer. 6 hours in, Detective Lowe meets with Mike's family, the victim's family. The medical examiner notified the family about the murder. Detective Lowe says that he is sorry for the loss, and he explained how the murder went and told them that he knew Mike. We're just trying to figure the motive, as he says. Did you all know if he had trouble with anyone? Asks the detective. No, nothing of that nature, the family's victims replied. They say that Mike was a good man, a father of 5 kids. The family of the victim was heartbroken and in need of an answer. What happened that night? Who was responsible? Detective Lowe says that he will do his best to find out the truth. Some hours went by, and Detective Lowe got a text. The girl, the witness, texted him, saying that she had told him everything that night. There is one thing she didn't point to the detective, and it was that Mike had texted her that night of his death. The girl needed some money, and Mike wanted to help her. She told him she wanted to work as the bottle girls at a club. Mike said they needed to meet face to face to talk about it. She said yes. After seeing those texts, the detective discussed them with the police officers. So, it was Mike's money. Why didn't she call 911? They think that this girl might have trapped Mike. She might be at fault in this murder case. While the police were doing their job, the victim's family held a goodbye ceremony where the murder took place. They lit up candles and asked for justice, as they should. As time slips away, Detective Lowe still needed answers. A week later, the witness, the girl, decides to show up and answer some questions finally. Let's start from the beginning, said Detective Lowe. She says, I texted him, and I asked if he could help me make some money. I wanted to be a bottle girl, and he was like, yeah, sure. He asked me how much I needed, and I said $1,000, and he said okay. Mike wanted to meet up the very next day. Is there anyone else that knew about you meeting up with Mike? Asks the detective. Yes, the only person who knew was Damel because I told him, she says. She says that she told Damel when Mike was on his way to meet her. When was the last time you talked to Damel? The detective asked. She says that the last time she talked to Damel was right after the shooting. I called Damel and told him that my friend just got shot, she says. Detective Lowe asked why she didn't call the police. The girl said that she was scared. I didn't know what to do, she said. Has Damel something to do with this? Asked Detective Lowe. No, I don't think he does, she says. Is there anything that you're leaving out, forgetting? Asks the detective. Earlier that day, we went looking for guns, she said. The detective was confused and asked who she was with. She continues, it was me, Daniel, and 2 other guys. His friends. She doesn't know their names, but they bought 2 guns. I took my ID because Damel said so. They bought the guns under my name, she says. They knew Mike was coming to get the girl. They knew that he had $1,000. The moment the police officers think that the girl had something to do with the murder, she says something. I don't want anything to happen to my family, she says. She said that he said he would kill her and her mother. The detective said that it's our job to get somebody out of the streets that don't belong on the streets. Who killed this boy? They asked her directly. The girl asked them if she could start over, and they said yes. The girl said, I looked at their faces. The 2 other guys, I don't know their names, but I know that they were with Damel. The victim says that the shooters were Damel's 2 friends who bought the guns under her name. They asked her how the person looked, which put the gun to her side. If she doesn't know their names and who they are, she can tell us how they looked. It's the least she can do. She continues to describe the guy. He had dreads, medium height. The detective asks her if Damel and his friends knew if Mike had any money. She said yes. Where do Damel work? Asks the detective. She said that Damel works somewhere in Pennsylvania. So, Damel doesn't live here. He is in and out of here. Detective Lowe says, hold on, and goes to search to find pieces of information about Damel. He goes on the computer and writes his name and where he lives. Detective Lowe finds a photo that matches the data. Damel Roberts is only 21-year-old. He has a prior conviction for auto theft. He's got a P.O. box. Detective Lowe says they should take the photo and show it to the girl if he is the one we're looking for. That's what they did. Do you know who this is? Asks Detective Lowe while showing the photo to her. She says, that's Damel. The detective asks if Damel went back to Pennsylvania. The girl says that she doesn't know where he is now and hasn't heard from him. Detective Lowe asks her for a phone number or any social media of Damel. The girl says that she can access Damel's recent calls because they share a phone plan. The detectives ask for more. They want to know who the other 2 guys are so that they can take them off the streets. But she keeps saying that the first time she has ever seen those 2 guys was that day. She says that she thinks they live in Pennsylvania. The police officers want to get these guys off the streets before they go and hurt somebody else. Detective Lowe thinks that Damel was the driver, and the other 2 boys were the shooters. He sends Damel's photo to the beat officer, hoping to run into that man. The next day, with no leads on where Damel was, the detective starts to see through his phone. It looks like he is making many calls on a Philadelphia number. They say, so I'm gonna plug it into social media platforms and see who stands behind this number, says Detective Lowe. The phone number belongs to a woman in Pennsylvania. Detective Howard Griffin decides to send this over to the intelligence analyst and see if they can find more information. After some hours, they got news from the intelligence analyst saying that the young lady had a restraining order against a young man called Cara Marindel. He is from the Pennsylvania area as well. This guy, Cara Marindel, had dreads, and the detectives think he might be one of the 2 shooters with Damel that night. Cara Marindel is a 19-year-old who has prior convictions for harassment and unlawful handgun possession. Without wasting time, the detectives decided to show the photo of Cara Marindel to the witness and see if he was the guy that pointed a gun at her to see if she noticed him. Lowe and Detective Jerry and Shepard Head decide to meet with the witness. She was confident. She identified Cara Marindel. He is the one that put a gun on her side. The detectives decide to reach out to Philadelphia PD to get information on Arindel and his known associates. Philadelphia Police Homicide directed them into a detective from the Pocono Police Department. They say that these guys are a part of a blood gang. Arindel is a suspected gang member in the Pocono Mountains region of Pennsylvania. Apparently, there are kingpins up there. Detective Lowe gets informed that they deal with drugs, with dope. They are some hazardous guys. Looking at his photos and personal information, they noticed that Arindel had several pictures with a specific guy. The Pocono Police Department was able to link this guy. He was Javon Nunes. Detective Lowe says that it looks like it has a warrant now. 21-year-old Javon Nunes is wanted in New York for robbery. Detective Lowe hopes that the victim identifies this guy too. A few hours later, the detectives meet with the witness again and ask her to view the photographs of Javon Nunes. Luckily, the witness identifies. The detectives high-fived each other. Detective Lowe is sure that Nunes and Arindel are the shooters. He says that he needs to track Damel first. A few days later, the case takes an unexpected turn. Damel is locked in jail for a stolen car out of Henry County. A friend of Damel passed a message that said that Damel wanted to talk to the police. The detectives decide to go fast before he changes his mind. They meet up at the Henry County Jail and decide to speak. "Tell me why you wanted me down here," asks the detective. "The incident that you are investigating, the murder case," said Damel. He said that there was an armed robbery and Mike got shot. Damel says that he knows who shot him. They are real gang brothers. Karim Arindel. The other guy's name is Javon Nunes, said Damel. Damel explains how the three of them were together that day. "We got here morning time and bought guns," he says. He says that the next day, the witness called Damel and told him that Mike was shot. "Were you with him when Mike got shot?" asks the detective. "No," he said Damel. He says that they had nothing to do with him. Damel says that he didn't give any false information. After they are done asking him questions, detectives talk with each other. Detective Lowe says she was texting with Damel. Damel for sure told the other two guys when Mike arrived. But Damel didn't tell us that. The team decides to wait on getting murder warrants until they can interview Nunes and Arindel. Then Lowe gets a break and Nunes is in jail. He was taken into custody in New York for his outstanding warrant for robbery. Detective Lowe and Griffin will fly up to Newark, New Jersey, to interview Nunes in jail. Detectives must work with Pocono PD and try to locate Arindel. Before detectives can interview Nunes, the case takes a different turn. Arindel has an active warrant now for charges up there. The Pocono police will take Arindel into custody on an unrelated domestic violence warrant. While heading into Pocono Regional Mountains, the detectives decide to interview Arindel first. They finally meet with Arindel. The detectives introduce themselves. They say, "We came from Atlanta. There was a shooting and a victim. Do you know who Damel Roberts is?" "I kind of know him," says Arindel. The detectives tell him that they know that Damel came down to Atlanta from the Poconos, with a group of people too. "One of them was actually you, Arindel," the detectives said. Arindel looked surprised. Arindel admits that he drove to Atlanta with Damel and Nunes. However, he kept saying that he had nothing to do with it, that he wasn't there. Detective Lowe decides to charge Arindel with murder. After that, he headed to New York to interview Nunes in jail. Detective Lowe got a call from the Suffolk County Jail. They say that Nunes didn't want to talk at all. This way Nunes gets charged for murder, and Detective Lowe will present evidence of Damel to the district attorney. In the end, Karim Arindel pleaded guilty to felony murder and was sentenced to 35 years. Javon Nunes was convicted for murder and armed robbery. He was sentenced to 2 life sentences. What about Damel Roberts? Subsequent evidence placed Damel near the crime scene at the time of the murder. Damel Roberts was convicted of felony murder and armed robbery. He was sentenced to 2 life sentences. The victim, Mike, will be missed. Justice will always be served. The breakup. On an evening at 6:45 p.m. near a quiet block in Mobile, Alabama, another crime happened. Every crime scene has its own story, and every time is heartbreaking. It all begins with a 911 call. What was the emergency? Someone had called 911 and told the address. It's a white house, and it's abandoned. There's a car parked behind the house, and there's a girl in there. The operator asked if the girl was inside of the vehicle. The caller said yes. The caller continues to describe the situation, saying that the girl got a pink towel covering her whole face and everything, and her windows are up. The caller said that he didn't know if the girl was breathing or not. The 911 operator says that they are going to alert the police. The patrol and the DMS responded and decided to go to the said location. They arrive at the area and find a woman in the passenger seat. She was dead. CPL. Kenneth Gillespie finds the place suspicious. It's a big abandoned house. The police officers ask about the victim's name. Who is she? The victim's name was Shanna Sumter, a black woman, only 27-year-old. She went to Murphy High School and earned her JED certificate. She worked as an insurance adjuster. Shanna leaves behind a large family. She was a mother and she had a 9-year-old son. Police officers and the detectives find out that she was shot in the left side of her head. Her cell phone was right down there to her legs. There was a gun right there, a .38 caliber revolver at her feet. The police officers were surprised and said that typically, they don't leave the weapon there when someone kills someone. One of the police officers says that it is a possibility that she had shot herself. Maybe it was a suicide. The police officer said the gunshot wound would be consistent if she was left-handed, but it's also possible that somebody in the driver's seat could have popped here as well. It was in the back of an abandoned house, and the police officers thought that it was a pretty big chance of being a suicide. It's a place where nobody would have seen anything. On the other hand, it's a good place for somebody to kill you, says CPL Kenneth Gillespie. Someone had called the reporter missing, and it was the victim's sister. Her sister called saying that she hadn't seen Shanna since Saturday. The police officer said that it would be a good idea to hear from her family. The police officer and the detectives meet up with the sister's victim. She seemed nervous, so they gave her some water. The officers say to her, "We don't know a lot yet, but we know that Shanna has been shot." Her sister didn't know and started crying. The officer says, "I am sorry for your loss. We don't know much. We don't know if it was self-inflicted or another person shot her." They asked the sister's victim if she had ever said anything about harming herself before. Was she the type to get depressed easily? Asked the officer. Her sister said that she had thoughts of harming herself before, but she always hid them. Was she left-handed or right-handed? Asks the officer. She said she was left-handed. The officers ask who is she involved in a relationship, and her sister tells her a name. The victim was in a relationship with someone called Peter Gales. He stayed with the victim. They lived together. When was the last time you talked to her? Asks the officer. She said yesterday. The detectives ask for the number of Peter Gales, and she gives it to them. Peter wasn't answering his phone. The detectives decide to look through the victim's phone. The text with Peter. They had texted yesterday at 11 a.m. The victim had texted him, "Peter, you rather be on the phone with a hoe. That is crazy. I am not happy about this, honestly. I want this to end. I am tired of you putting your hands on me. I want no boyfriend. I must do what's good for me." The team discovered she was fighting with her boyfriend Peter Gales the day before she was found dead. She was trying to get away from him. Peter has obtained a warrant for possession of cocaine. Let's bring him in. The next morning, detectives find Peter at his mother's apartment. They bring him in so they can start asking questions. "I am Detective Glue, and this is my partner Detective Rogers. You know what, we want to talk to you," they say. Peter says that the baby daddy of Shanae told him that she was shot. "How long have you been together?" the detectives ask. "It would have been a year in August," he said. He said that the last time they talked was the day before yesterday and that he and the victim got in an argument. He said he was riding in a black rental car. Peter explains, "We were in the car and then my side chick called me, my other girlfriend. Shanice got so jealous, she just got crazy. She kind of hit the cop and my gun just fell on the passenger side somewhere on the floor. I get her to drop me off. She left with everything in the car. My money and my gun were in the car. I had been texting to see where she was. I didn't get a reply." He says that the victim told him about suicidal thoughts before. "What other stuff has she told you?" asks the detective. He said that she always used to say how he didn't love her and made her look stupid. "I thought she was gonna come back. My girl is gone," says Peter as he cries loudly. The detectives tell him that Shanae was found in Dauphin Island Parkway. He didn't know that. The detectives don't believe him. The texts were showing something else. She wasn't happy with him. The detective tried to scare him a little bit and said, "There are 6 detectives that are listening to everything you're saying now. We want you to tell us what happened." This seemed to affect him. Peter goes, "It's just, she grabbed the gun so quickly. And we're arguing, going crazy. Next thing I know, a shotgun noise. I didn't know what to do. I drove around for some time." The detective said that, "I don't believe that she killed herself and that they completed the autopsy this morning. Based on that direction that bullet traveled, it wouldn't be possible for her to shoot herself." What happened in the car? Peter gives up and decides to tell the truth. "She had grabbed the gun. I grabbed the gun from her. She tries to hop up. When she jumped up, the gun went off." He says, "You had the gun on your hand, right?" He replied, "Yes." "She was not moving. I put on the cover up. It was a towel. And then I left." 20 hours in the first 48 hours. Detective Gillespie closed his case. Peter did pull the trigger, even if he regrets it. Peter Gales was charged with murder and is awaiting trial. The victim was a mother that didn't deserve such tragedy to happen to her.